Friends, we can all see that many white bloggers have millions of followers. Please support me too, because my followers are still few. Black bloggers also deserve to be famous. My friends, let's unite and lift each other up. Please press subscribe button and like. In the heart of Millbrook Heights, Georgia, a seemingly idyllic suburban town, the sun rose over the polished streets lined with manicured lawns and pristine homes. Officer Derek Matthews, a 45-year-old veteran of the local police force, sat in his patrol car outside the Millbrook Heights police station, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of trouble. But trouble was about to find him. Across the street at the Chevron gas station, a well-dressed man stepped out of a sleek black sedan. David Richardson, 42, was on his way to his first day as the new police chief. He had spent the morning preparing for this moment, reviewing personnel files and budget reports in his hotel room. With a master's degree in criminal justice and 2 decades of experience with the Atlanta Police Department, he was ready to bring change to a department steeped in old-school mentality. S. David filled his tank. Matthews' gaze fell upon him. "Hey, boy, where'd you steal that fancy ride?" he shouted, stepping out his car with an air of authority. The words hung in the air, heavy with racial undertones. David froze, his heart racing as he felt the weight of Matthews' accusation. "Don't you dare touch me. That's assault on a police officer," Matthews barked, shoving David's shoulder. David raised his hand slowly, his jaw tightening with controlled anger. He had faced prejudice before, but this was different. This was happening right outside the police station. The gas station bustled with activity, but all eyes were now on the confrontation. A construction worker paused mid-sip of his coffee. Soccer moms gawked from their SUVs, and a teenager recorded the scene on his phone. David knew he had to remain calm. "Officer, I'm simply getting my identification," he said, his voice steady. Matthews' face twisted with rage. "Slow movements," I said. "Slow." David complied, retrieving his wallet with deliberate care. He could feel the tension in the air, the crowd's anticipation palpable. Matthews examined David's driver's license as if it were evidence at a crime scene, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "David Richardson, Atlanta address. What are you really doing in our neighborhood?" Matthews sneered, stepping closer, invading David's personal space. The implication was clear. A black man in a nice suit didn't belong here. David's composure began to crack. "I'm legally parked on private property. I've committed no crime. What's your reasonable suspicion for this stop?" His voice remained professional, but the frustration bubbled beneath the surface. Matthews laughed harshly, his contempt evident. "How about you matching the description of someone involved in recent break-ins? How about that expensive car and fancy clothes that don't match your demographic?" The crowd murmured in disbelief. David felt the heat rising in his chest. "Officer, there's no marijuana in my vehicle. I don't use drugs, and I'd appreciate it if you'd stop making false accusations. Don't tell me how to do my job, boy." Matthews spat, the word cutting through the air like a whip. Gasps erupted from the onlookers. David's fist clenched involuntarily, but he fought to maintain his dignity. S. Matthews called for backup. David realized he was about to become the victim of the very system he was hired to reform. He had no idea that his badge, hidden beneath his jacket, would soon change everything. Within moments, 2 additional patrol cars screeched into the parking lot, and officers Emma Rodriguez and Tom Bradley emerged, hands resting on their weapons. The atmosphere shifted from a simple gas station stop to a scene reminiscent of a military operation. "Central, we got a suspicious individual in a potentially stolen vehicle," Matthews announced over the radio, his voice dripping with authority. David's heart raced as he realized the gravity of the situation. He was surrounded by officers who saw only his skin color and assumed criminality. "Officers, I must state this clearly for all the recording devices present. I am David Richardson. I am legally parked on private property. I have committed no crime," he declared, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Matthew stepped closer, his breath hot against David's face. "You're in my town now, and in my town, people like you show respect to people like me. You got a problem with that, boy?" The tension reached a boiling point. David's hidden badge was about to be revealed, and with it, the truth of the situation. As Matthews yanked David to his feet, the torn fabric of his suit revealed the glint of a 5-pointed star. The official badge of the police chief, Matthews' face drained to color as he realized the man he had just assaulted was his new commanding officer. "No, this can't be happening," he stammered, backing away in horror. The crowd erupted in disbelief and applause as David straightened his jacket, his voice carrying authority. "Officer Matthews, you have just committed assault, battery, and false imprisonment. You will be held accountable for your actions." As the reality of the situation sank in, the officers who had surrounded David now found themselves in precarious position. The crowd, once silent witnesses, became advocates for justice, their phones capturing every moment. David took control of the scene, issuing commands with the confidence of a leader. "Officer Sullivan, document those self-inflicted scratches and explain how you acquired them. Officer Rodriguez, secure this scene. Officer Bradley, contact Internal Affairs and the mayor immediately." The officers, once the aggressors, now stood frozen, realizing the magnitude of their mistakes. Matthews dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he pleaded for mercy. "Please, we were just doing our job." David's voice cut through the chaos. "Your job was to protect and serve, not to profile and assault. You have destroyed your careers today." As the sirens wailed in the distance, the reality of the situation became clear. Justice was about to be served, and the truth would prevail. The crowd erupted in cheers as David stood tall, a symbol of resilience and accountability. But just as a moment of triumph began to settle in, the sound of approaching sirens grew louder, and the atmosphere thickened with anticipation. David knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger confrontation, one that would test not only his resolve, but also the very fabric of the community he was sworn to protect. As the first patrol car arrived, the officers inside were met with a scene that would forever change the course of their lives. They stepped out, eyes wide with disbelief, as they took inside their fellow officers on their knees. The new police chief standing tall, and the crowd of witnesses capturing every moment. "What's going on here?" one of the new officers asked, confusion etched on his face. David took a deep breath, ready to explain the chaos that had unfolded. But before he could speak, Matthews, still on his knees, blurted out, "It was a misunderstanding. We were just doing our job." The crowd erupted in disbelief, and David felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was not just about him. It was about the community, the trust that had been shattered, and the accountability that was long overdue. As the new officers began to assess the situation, David knew that the truth would soon come to light. The hidden badge, the unjust treatment, and the systemic issues within the department were all about to be exposed. And in that moment, he realized that this was not just a confrontation. It was a turning point for Millbrook Heights. The stage was set for a reckoning, and David was determined to ensure that justice would prevail. But as the crowd watched with bated breath, he understood that the real battle was just beginning. Would the truth be enough to change the hearts and minds of those who had turned a blind eye for so long? Would accountability finally take root in a system that had been resistant to change? As the sirens faded into background, David prepared to speak, knowing that his words would resonate far beyond this moment. He was ready to confront not just the officers before him, but the very culture that had allowed such injustices to persist. And with that, he stepped forward, ready to reclaim a narrative and demand the respect and accountability that every citizen deserved. The crowd leaned in, eager to hear what the new chief would say, unaware that this moment would mark the beginning of a new chapter in their community's history. But just as he opened his mouth to speak, the tension in the air thickened once more, and the crowd held its breath, waiting for the truth to unfold. David took a moment to gather his thoughts, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He could sense the anticipation in the crowd, the collective hope that justice would finally be served. "Everyone," he began, his voice steady and commanding, "what you just witnessed is a reflection of the systemic issues that plague our community. This isn't just about me. It's about the trust that has been broken between law enforcement and the people we are sworn to protect." The crowd murmured in agreement, their eyes fixed on him. David continued, "Today, I stand before you not just as your new police chief, but as a man who has faced the very prejudices that we must confront together. This incident is a wake-up call for all of us." Matthews, still on his knees, looked up in disbelief. "You don't understand. We were just following protocol," he protested, desperation creeping into his voice. David's gaze hardened. Following protocol? Is that what you call racial profiling and assault? This is not the kind of policing our community deserves. We must do better. The crowd erupted in applause, their support for David growing stronger. He could feel the momentum shifting, the tide turning in favor of accountability and justice. From this day forward, David declared, we will implement changes that prioritize transparency, community engagement, and respect for every individual, regardless of their background. We will rebuild the trust that has been shattered. As he spoke, David could see the faces of the onlookers. Some hopeful, some skeptical, but all engaged. He knew that this was just the beginning of a long journey toward reform, but he was ready to lead the charge. But just as he was about to outline the next steps, a voice from the crowd interrupted. What about the officers involved? Will they face consequences? David paused, the weight of the question hanging in the air. He turned to face Matthews and the other officers, who were now standing awkwardly, their expressions a mix of fear and defiance. Yes, he replied firmly. They will be held accountable for their actions. This is not just about punishment. It's about creating a culture of responsibility within our department. The crowd erupted in cheers once more, and David felt a surge of hope. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when the community began to unite for change. But as the applause faded, David knew that the real work was just beginning. He had to ensure that the promises he made today would not be forgotten tomorrow. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but he was determined to see it through. As he looked out over the crowd, he realized that this was not just a turning point for him, but for the entire community. Together, they would confront the injustices that had long been ignored, and together, they would forge a new future. And with that, David took a deep breath, ready to lead the charge toward a brighter tomorrow. But just as he was about to continue, the sound of approaching sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of more officers and the beginning of a new chapter in Millbrook Heights. The crowd held its breath, waiting for what would happen next, as the tension in the air thickened once more. David knew that the moment of truth was upon them, and he was ready to face whatever came next. Do you want to know the fate of the heroes? Please post part 2. Subscribe to the channel and continue watching. Your opinion and support are important to me. Leave it in the comments. Thank you.